Welcome to Charts Today. It is Monday, the 10th of August, and I have been away for a couple of weeks. I was in Spain for a wedding, and then I've been racing in Cowswick in the UK. So I've been a little bit away from markets. I've been still producing my energy report for clients every morning for professional energy trading clients, and keeping an eye on markets. But realistically, not a lot has changed on the long-term charts. It's just two candles if you think about it. And the week before last, we had a really quite a bullish candle, almost like a doji. And we've seen a very strong candle last week. So Nasdaq recovering, the long-term picture, we've got upside targets, waiting to see if we activate a new upside targets with a new high. But this is what tends to happen with markets. You get this big move with a trend, sideways, big move again. You have periods of wobbling, but we've been above the cloud, especially on the lagging line, for a very long time on the Nasdaq. So really, since 2022, we've been in a bull trend. And so that's always key to remember. Now, looking at the macro picture, starting with the dollar, again, not a great deal of change. We are below the cloud on the long-term chart. We are waiting to see which way we break. There were weak employment numbers out in the US last week, and that is now starting to mean that markets are considering that we won't have an interest rate rise with that weak economy. And we've got this sort of inflation or stagflation where markets, obviously low interest rates environment is good for markets, but we've also got a low growth environment. So really quite a challenge there longer term. Looking at currencies, we saw the Japanese yen had a big dive last week, having hit a high of 63. That is almost certainly intervention from the Bank of Japan, but we are still holding above the cloud there. If you look at the weekly chart, big move in 21-22, then sideways and just pushing higher, and this has an inflationary effect for Japan. Looking at sterling, we are really waiting for the UK for a break in either direction, so no clear signs there. And if we look at Bitcoin just quickly, that's still looking fairly depressed as well. And look at the bond markets. So Japan, we're waiting to see which way we break on the bond market. Will we break higher and activate this upside target? That's the key question. US bond yields came back a little bit on the end of last week on those job numbers, meaning that the Fed is less likely to raise. Not a given, but that's the way the market has interpreted that data. And if we look at the UK, again, we are seeing bond yields seeing a little bit of a fall off here for the moment. So we are still in a bull trend, of course. And if you look at Europe, we are seeing very much bond yields pushing higher. In terms of markets, if we go back to the Nasdaq, looking at the future, we are up 0.5% today, so it suggests we're going to have a open higher. The S&P Mini is also breaking to new highs, looking better than the Nasdaq, and the UK market has nudged new highs as well. The DAX in Germany, we're seeing again breaking to new highs. So markets actually looking quite strong, and even the Japanese market, which has nearly doubled over the last several years, is also pushing higher. So that's going to be quite key. The Sensex in India, that has been a weaker performer, but is now starting to look like a recovery. So that's quite good news. And the Aussie market, although it was down last night, we do have a new upside target, and that is pointing higher as well. Crude oil, very much a political play at the moment, of course, waiting to see what happens in the Middle East. We've got downside targets, but we have crossed back above the cloud, and we're up 1% today. Some of the other commodities we're seeing, cocoa, upside targets there, although we've just hit some buffers there. Coffee, also we're seeing upside targets, and sugar. This has really been a big move, starting the beginnings of potentially a new uptrend, making highest levels that we've seen since October. So that's quite key. Wheat, soft commodities in an emerging uptrend, and the big story really is that gold has found support at that 4,000 level. Really quite strong support. Did dip below 4,000, fell as low as 3,960. But the interesting thing is that we are now just hitting the cloud resistance there on the daily. If we look at the weekly, we found cloud support. Really, so that's quite good. We do have a downside target still, but we are holding the trend. And then if we look at the 60-minute chart, we are waiting to see if we could activate this upside target to 4,600. But it is looking like gold is in recovery mode. Silver also pushing higher. Remember, we talked about that range of 57.63, where we're now out of that range, and again, not quite as clear hitting the top of the cloud, but we are finding support there. So precious metals starting to look interesting. SpaceX had a very big day on Friday. They moved substantially up. There were some upside targets given there, and they've been met. So yeah, that's good news for SpaceX holders. We're seeing some recovery towards that issue price, which will be a relief for a lot of SpaceX investors. We're looking at Apple here, just falling away from the new high. Amazon actually activating a new upside target. Alphabet also just really not looking quite as strong, but still above the cloud. And if we look at Microsoft, that has actually come back quite some way, having had a terrible previous 12 months. Nvidia up 2% on Friday, so we're seeing some return on chips, and in Tesla up 2.8%, but still pretty bearish below the cloud. Found previous support there. Looking at the Dow, we had a pretty mixed performance. Some of the underperformers of late coming back to the fore, and so that's really quite interesting. And then if we look at the Nasdaq, we did have some pretty strong performances here as well. Airbnb, upside targets here that were sitting there, that was up 17%, so really quite key. SpaceX, of course, was among them. Microchip, actually a lot of the chips sort of seeing some recovery. The worst performers were just a handful of stocks, really. So we're seeing the market coming back. UK market this morning, we're seeing really that it's the resource stocks. They're coming back into play. Glencore, Anglo American, we're seeing Antofagasta, a lot of these resource stocks coming back into play. Not looking so strong there on Antofagasta, but we are just seeing that. Melrose, we're seeing also just pushing higher. Rio Tinto. So it is resource stocks today that are doing better. So definitely worth keeping an eye on there and watch the targets. On the downside in the UK, we're seeing some of the we're seeing tobacco stocks lower, we're seeing GSK down, so that's really quite key. Vodafone down 1%. Actually more stocks down than up, so it's a handful of stocks that are keeping the FTSE going today. So that's it for today. Keep an eye on those price targets. It's good to be back watching the markets, and we'll keep an eye going forward. Until tomorrow, have a great day. Happy charting. Bye for now.